Hi everyone, as I said, my name is Jonny Ball, so I'm an outreach advisor for the Woodland Trust. Can you all hear me? I'll try and speak over the wind. Yeah. So my role is to go out and see landowners and farmers like yourself and provide advice on tree planting, basically. So something we've seen a lot of interest in recently is agroforestry, like what John has here. So agroforestry is just the integration of trees into a farming system. So what John has here we'd consider silvo-arable, which is trees within an arable system, but there's also silvo-pastoral, so that's including trees into a livestock farming system. You could just be as basic as putting in more hedges on your farm. Those hedges are providing a service and a benefit for you. They should be helping you with things like biodiversity, so there's no reason that shouldn't be considered agroforestry. And then there's some slightly more niche examples like forest farming and permaculture. So why on earth would anyone put a tree into a productive piece of land? Hopefully the answer is to improve productivity, improve business resilience. So if you think about the way a tree grows, its roots have access to a far greater amount of soil than a conventional crop would, and the product you're getting off the tree is in a space well above a conventional crop. So the phrase that gets knocked about a lot with agroforestry is you're farming in 3D, so you're expanding from that surface that your conventional crops are in to above and below the soil as well. So the other benefits trees provide for your farm: obviously trees are absolutely fantastic for biodiversity. They can bring in all sorts of birds, mammals, insects. Hopefully they'll be beneficial for you. Obviously we all know about pollinators and predatory insects that can reduce the need for pesticides, and they're also amazing sequesters of carbon. So as well as sequestering carbon in the trees themselves, come autumn, trees like this will shed their leaves, and then all that carbon and organic matter will be integrated into the soil. So you're also increasing the amount of carbon that you're storing in your soil, as well as the trees itself. In a silvo-pastoral system, trees can be absolutely fantastic for animal welfare. So they can provide shelter from the sun, reducing heat stress and reducing the need for as much water. And in the winter, obviously, they can shelter animals from adverse weather, cold winds, rains, etc. So reducing the need for housing and potentially allowing you to do things like lambing outdoors. There are some things you need to consider when embarking on an agroforestry project. The first one is there a market? Or firstly, what do I want to grow, and is there a market for what I want to grow? So the classic example is apple trees, but if you're planting hundreds of apples, which when mature can produce 30 to 40 kilos per tree, that's potentially tons and tons of apples you are going to have to either sell or process at the end of it. Otherwise you're going to have a lot of wasps basically in the autumn. So you need to have considered whether there's a market or whether you can create a market to get rid of the produce at the end of the season. You need to consider whether your land is appropriate for planting trees, because we don't necessarily want to be planting trees if it's not the right place for them. If you've got fantastic wildflower meadows, planting trees may end up being a detriment. If you've got wet, peaty fenland soil, then planting trees may actually dry that kind of land out and end up releasing more carbon. So you need to take these things into consideration when thinking about agroforestry. You also need to consider that growing trees, especially productive trees, requires a lot of care and maintenance and time and skill as well. So whether you can provide that for the tree is something you need to consider. It's not just a matter of digging a hole, putting a tree in, and then in a few years' time you'll have a load of apples or nuts or other fruit. Hopefully I haven't put you off agroforestry. If it's something that you're still considering, I think one of the main questions is who's going to pay for it. Hopefully that's where the Woodland Trust and other organisations like us come in. So we have a suite of grant schemes available. For basic woodland creation, we have something called More Woods. So that is up to 75% funding for tree planting. It just has to be a minimum of half a hectare, but that can be broken up into blocks across the farm. It doesn't have to be all in one place. We're also happy to advise on Forestry Commission grants. So we'll fund 75% of woodland creation. The Forestry Commission can fund way more than what we do, and they will also fund the capital items such as fencing and deer fencing and gates and that kind of thing, with ongoing maintenance payments as well. So especially for larger woodland creation projects, sometimes that will be much more attractive, and we're still more than happy to help out with the tree advice and with the planting design, and help with the paperwork as well, because it can sometimes result in lots of paperwork, especially on larger sites when you might need an environmental impact assessment. With regards to agroforestry, we have a scheme called Trees for Your Farm. So that is a scheme funded by us and by Sainsbury's, and that can be up to 100% funding for setting up an agroforestry system. So it's a bespoke grant. So if you get through the approvals round, then we will come out and see you. We will have a walk around. We will assess your site. We will have a chat about what you want. We will have a chat about how much it's going to cost, and hopefully we'll be able to set you up with a really cracking agroforestry system. That's it from me. Any questions? I'm happy to take them. Thank you very much. Hope you had a nice day.
Do you have a problem where the trees are coming from, as in the worry about importing disease and stuff?
Yes, so all of our Woodland Trust supplied trees, we insist on them being UK sourced and grown. So for slightly exotic agroforestry cultivars, that might be an issue, but what we have done in the past is worked with nurseries to bring in foreign stock, and these nurseries are very good at quarantining and ensuring that trees that are brought in are kept separate from UK source and grown stock, and then growing on and either grafting or seeding from foreign stock down several generations until it could be considered effectively UK source and grown. So one of the caveats to our agroforestry scheme is it needs to be a minimum of 25% native UK broadleaf, and all of our native UK broadleaf is UK source and grown. We will endeavour to find UK source and grown trees where we can, and if we can't, we'll see if we can breed and bring in stock and turn it into UK source and grown effectively.
Woodland Trust are quite a big landowner in their own right now. Have you done any agroforestry yourselves, and do you intend to?
We haven't done any agroforestry on our own estate. It has been talked about. A lot of our land that we do own is usually really nice biodiverse habitat, so it may not necessarily be appropriate to be putting agroforestry in these areas, but it's certainly been looked at. Something that we have considered is wood pasture and parkland establishment, because we do have sites that are grazed, so turning grazed fields into wood pasture just makes absolute sense.
It's just a bit of a shame. You've bought 1,000 acres next to me, which was bare land, yeah, and you didn't have a go at agroforestry. It just seems like you're missing a trick to me. Preach what you are.
I quite agree.
So whenever I've been thinking about this agroforestry, I've been thinking that to try and find the labour to harvest this is going to be a bit of a problem. So I've been thinking, well, I should probably go down an animal harvesting type of a route. What sort of species would I be thinking about to be able to harvest using animals to harvest the fruits of my endeavours?
So that entirely depends on what you are wanting to get out of the system. So like I said, when we come out and set up an agroforestry scheme, we do it entirely bespoke around what you want. So are you thinking about using animals, feeding top fruits to animals? Or are you thinking about feeding things like tree hay and using the trees themselves, the leaves of the trees, as fodder? This is the kind of conversation that we'd have on an agroforestry visit. So what are you considering growing, basically, and what do you want to do with it? So is apple something you were considering? Yeah, so again, it takes something like a productive fruit tree. It does take a lot. I mean, George knows it takes a lot of aftercare and attention, whereas actually integrating trees into an animal system might actually be slightly less involved, because effectively if you can put the appropriate protection in for a tree and graze animals around it, the tree is going to be providing that benefit, and if you're not using that tree to harvest anything from the tree itself, then yeah, you just let it do its thing, really. Potentially, you have to be careful. There's certain, I don't think walnuts are very good for animals. Ash nuts aren't particularly good either. Sycamore seeds obviously not very good for horses and things. So yeah, acorns aren't very good for animals apart from pigs. So yeah, it just needs to be considered. But I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't grow apples to feed to animals. I mean, you'd have some very happy pigs, I think, if you're feeding them apples.
So the least productive part of my field is around the outside where the hedges are, where the trees are. How can you control the spread of the trees to be able to work between them and prevent massive loss of farmland and production?
So are you talking about the space in between the alleys of trees and the hedges?
You trim the hedges every year?
Yeah.
Back.
Yeah.
Can you trim the trees?
Potentially, yes. And in fact, so John is growing native broadleaf trees here for timber. So he's actually going to want to be pruning them to force them up. And by the time they get to the point where they may start to be an issue for productivity, when they start to reach maturity and they're obviously blocking out a lot of light, that's the stage when he's going to be taking them out. So then it's becoming opened out again, and he'll be replacing them with small trees. So the intention here isn't to have lines of mature trees. These are going to be coming out in stages as they mature. There's a variety of different trees in here that mature at different times. So that's constantly going to be opened out and changed, and there'll be different age structures in there. So so you wouldn't just have a line of mature trees in there. That you'd look at what you want out of the system, and you'd work that into it.
Thank you, Johnny.
Pleasure.